What if Jesus appeared today, preaching the same message, performing the same miracles, challenging the same religious structures? Would we welcome him or crucify him all over again? I believe if Jesus came today, he would face the exact same rejection from religious leaders that he faced in the first century. And it's not because today's church leaders are uniquely corrupt or evil. It's because the same systemic factors that led to his crucifixion are still firmly in place in our religious institutions. Let's examine what really got Jesus killed and see how those exact same dynamics operate in today's church. We often simplify the story by saying religious leaders were jealous of Jesus, or they didn't recognize the Messiah. But that misses the deeper systemic issues at play. Jesus wasn't crucified primarily for what he taught, but for who had the authority to teach it. The religious leaders weren't against interpretation itself. They engaged in it constantly. They weren't even against healing or good works. What they couldn't tolerate was someone operating outside their established system of authority. Remember, when they challenged Jesus, by what authority do you do these things? And who gave you this authority? Matthew 21:23. That's the critical question. The issue wasn't the message, but the messenger's credentials. They could circumcise on the Sabbath, but were enraged when Jesus healed on the Sabbath. Why? Both were technically work, but one was sanctioned by the religious establishment and the other wasn't. It wasn't about interpretation, it was about who had the right to interpret. Today's religious establishment operates the same gatekeeping mentality. We've created elaborate systems that determine who can speak with authority. Seminary degrees and ordinations that credential official voices. Publishing houses that determine which books reach Christian audiences. Conference circuits that anoint the next generation of leaders. Denominational hierarchies that control pulpits. And social media algorithms that amplify established voices. When someone operates outside these systems while claiming divine authority just as Jesus did, the reaction is remarkably similar to what Jesus faced. The question remains the same. Where did you get your authority? Who credentialed you? The message itself is often secondary to the messenger's position within the approved system. In Jesus' day, the religious leaders had built layers upon layers of interpretation on scripture. The original meaning was buried under rabbinic commentary, traditional applications, and institutional policies. When Jesus said, "You have heard it said, but I tell to you," he wasn't changing scripture, he was cutting through the accumulation of interpretations to reveal the original intent. Today we have the same issue. Most Christians don't primarily engage with scripture directly. They engage with interpretations of scripture. We have commentaries on commentaries on commentaries. Traditional interpretations that haven't been questioned for centuries. Denominational positions that are treated as authoritative as scripture itself. Popular books and sermons that become the lens through which we read the Bible. Just like in Jesus' day, when someone bypasses these layers and claims to speak directly from God's revelation, the system reacts with hostility. When we talk about challenging the religious gatekeeping, I'm not suggesting we abandon all discernment about who to listen to. The critical question is, what are the right credentials? In Jesus' confrontations with religious leaders, notice that what he pointed to as his credentials. When they questioned his authority, he didn't produce rabbinic certifications or lineage papers. Instead, Jesus consistently pointed to the fruit of his ministry. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Or at least believe on the evidence of the work themselves. John 14:11. When John the Baptist sent messengers asking if Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus didn't say, "Check my genealogy," or ask the Sanhedrin about me. He said, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised." Matthew 11:4-5. The undeniable fruit of transformed lives was his credential. Today we flip this completely. We validate voices based on institutional approval rather than spiritual fruit. We've created systems where someone with the right degrees, endorsements, and platform can speak with authority, even if the fruit of their ministry is questionable. And we've become masters at selectively applying scripture to protect these systems. When someone operates outside established channels, we say, where's their covering? Who trained them? Elijah anointed Elisha so you must be under someone's authority. Yet we conveniently ignore clear counterexamples like John the Baptist, who emerged from the wilderness without institutional validation, or Paul, who explicitly stated in Galatians 1:11-12, "I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ." When church leaders get caught in scandals, we suddenly shift to a different standard, saying, well, look at David. God still used him despite his failures. We cherry pick scriptural examples to sustain the system that gives us authority. Jesus established a simple credential system. By their fruit you will recognize them, not by their degrees, their following, their eloquence, or their institutional approval, but by the actual evidence of God's work through them. As we discussed in our last video about the Christian content loop, we have a crisis of spiritual insight in today's church. In Jesus' day, there was an established religious routine, but the word of the Lord was rare, just like in Samuel's time. Jesus brought fresh, spiritually alive insight that didn't sound like the scribes and Pharisees. He taught as one having authority. Today's religious establishment, like the one in Jesus' time, has confused repetition with revelation. We've mistaken the recycling of content for spiritual insight. If Jesus appeared today, speaking with the same freshness and authority, bypassing our established content creation systems, the reaction will be predictable. This person doesn't sound like the voices we're used to, therefore they cannot be from God. Another crucial factor in Jesus' crucifixion was the apathy of the general population. While some followed him passionately, many were passive participants in the religious system, unwilling to challenge the authorities even when they saw corruption or recognized truth. Remember how quickly the crowds went from shouting Hosanna to crucify him? They ultimately deferred to their religious leaders rather than standing firm on what they witnessed. Today, most Christians remain passive consumers of religious content rather than active discerners of truth. We've been trained to defer to the credentials rather than discern the content. Value institutional loyalty over spiritual authenticity. Stay comfortable rather than confront established powers. Accept contradictions between Jesus' words and church practice. This passive apathy allows the same system that will reject Jesus to continue unchallenged. Given these parallel factors, the gatekeeping, the layers of interpretation, the stagnant revelation, and the apathetic populace, I believe the result will be the same. A figure like Jesus, uncredentialed by traditional standards, by bypassing established authority structures, cutting through interpretations to restore original meaning, bringing spiritually alive insight instead of rehearsed content, and challenging passive religious consumption will face the same systemic rejection. The methods might differ. We use social media campaigns rather than Roman crosses, but the underlying dynamic will be identical. And just like the first time, this rejection wouldn't come from overtly evil people. It will come from sincere religious leaders protecting what they believe to be sacred, the established religious order.